The day Heather shattered my trust started with an argument over a damn coffee mug. One mug, an ordinary white one I'd never paid attention to before. "Why is this in the dishwasher?" "This isn't ours," I said, holding it up. It had a little chip on the handle and a logo for some auto repair shop we'd never been to. Heather glanced over her shoulder from where she stood fixing her hair in the hallway mirror. "Oh, that? I don't know. Must have been left here after book club." I frowned. "Book club? You've been doing book club at Monica's for months now. Since when are people coming here for it?" She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. "Relax, Nick. It's probably Monica's. She's always leaving stuff behind. Why are you so worked up about a stupid mug?" I didn't answer. Something about her tone. It wasn't the Heather I knew. It was sharper, defensive. The moment passed, but the mug stayed with me. That same evening, when Heather left for another book club, I decided to let my curiosity take the wheel. Not in a jealous husband watching too much TV kind of way, but something about her energy lately felt off. Like static in the air before a storm. I texted Monica, casually asking her how book club was going. Her response was almost immediate. "Book club? Haha, what book club? Now, I'm not stupid." Heather and Monica had been best friends since college, but they weren't above pulling stunts together. Maybe Heather had some surprise planned, or maybe Monica was covering for her. Still, it felt wrong. So I waited. She came home late that night, her cheeks flushed, a slight gleam in her eyes. The smell of wine clung to her, but not the wine we usually drank. No, this was something earthy and expensive. "How was Monica's?" I asked, leaning casually against the kitchen counter as she walked in. Heather didn't miss a beat. "Great. We're thinking of doing a weekend retreat next month." "Sounds fun. What book did you discuss?" She blinked at me. Once, twice. Her mouth opened, then shut, like she was flipping through a mental Rolodex for the right answer. Finally, she shrugged. "You know, the usual. I don't think you'd like it. It's pretty heavy stuff." Something inside me shifted then. Not anger, not suspicion. Something quieter, like a predator catching the faintest whiff of its prey. Over the next week, I started to watch her more closely. Little things popped out. She'd turn her phone screen away when I walked by or leave the room to answer calls. When I casually asked about work, she was vague, offering just enough to close the conversation but not enough to satisfy. The tipping point came on a Thursday night. She'd gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion. But when I walked into the room hours later, I noticed her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Now, I'd never been the kind of guy to snoop. It's just not my style. But something about that damn mug and Monica's text and Heather's weird behavior. It all swirled together in my head like a storm cloud. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up with a text from someone named S. "Can't stop thinking about earlier. You're incredible." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. For a moment, I thought about waking her up right there, throwing the phone at her, demanding answers. But something told me to hold back. I needed more than a single text. So, I did the one thing I never thought I'd do. I started digging. That night, I downloaded a recovery app on her phone and synced the deleted messages to my laptop. It was like opening Pandora's box. Photos, messages, even voice memos. All from S. And none of it left any doubt about what had been happening. Heather wasn't just cheating. She was methodical about it, weaving lies so intricate I almost admired the craftsmanship. Almost. As I sat there, staring at the glowing screen in our darkened living room, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just betrayal, it was war. And I wasn't going to be the fool standing still while the wreckage fell around me. No, I was going to play this game. And I was going to win. The next morning, Heather was her usual self. Cheerful, bright-eyed, pretending to care about the toast she burned or the coffee she made too weak. I watched her move around the kitchen, her robe tied loosely at the waist, humming a tune under her breath. It was infuriating. How could she act so normal after everything I'd seen last night? Did she even care? Did she think I was too stupid to notice? Busy day today? I asked casually, masking the simmering rage in my chest. She barely looked up from her plate. Oh, you know, the usual. Meetings, emails, the works. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't rush to grab it like she usually did, probably trying to play it cool. but I'd already synced her messages to my laptop, so I knew exactly what it said. Still thinking about yesterday. Can we meet tonight? It was from him. S. I chewed my toast slowly, pretending I didn't notice. This wasn't the time for a confrontation. Not yet. No, this was the time to gather ammunition. As Heather left for work, I started putting my plan into motion. First, I called her office. The receptionist was polite but confused when I asked to be connected to Heather's desk. She's on personal leave this week, the receptionist said. I hung up without another word, my blood boiling. Personal leave? She didn't even bother to cover her tracks properly. I spent the rest of the day researching everything I could about this mysterious S. His name was Scott, as I learned from the recovery app. He owned a high-end auto shop on the other side of town, the same one from the logo on the chipped mug. It didn't take long to find his Instagram, where he posted photos of custom cars, his dog, and occasionally himself. He looked exactly like the kind of guy Heather would fall for. Tall, smug, the type who probably uses the word bro unironically. In one of his posts, he was holding a glass of wine on a rooftop, captioned, "Perfect view, perfect company." The date? Last Thursday, the night of Heather's book club. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or punch a hole in the wall. By the time Heather got home that evening, I had a full dossier on her affair. Texts, photos, receipts. I even knew which hotel they'd been sneaking off to. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I leaned into the game. "How was work?" I asked as she walked in, kicking off her heels. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before smiling. "Long. I'm exhausted." "Dinner's in the oven," I said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Thanks, babe. You're the best." She kissed me on the cheek, and I forced myself not to flinch. That night, I watched her sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful, like she didn't have a care in the world. I wondered if she'd dream about him, if she'd wake up and send him another text while I made her breakfast. But I wasn't angry anymore. No, anger was too easy. What I felt was something deeper, sharper, a quiet resolve. She thought she was playing me, but what she didn't realize was that I'd already flipped the board. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I slipped her car key off the hook and headed outside. I popped the trunk, rummaging through the gym bag she kept there. Sure enough, I found a bottle of expensive cologne that wasn't mine and a neatly folded receipt from the hotel. Room 217. I tucked the receipt into my pocket and left everything else exactly as I found it. By the time Heather came downstairs, dressed and ready for another day of lies, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee. "Big plans today?" I asked, handing her a mug. She hesitated again, just for a moment. "Not really. Probably just going to the gym after work." I nodded, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Sounds nice. You deserve a break." And just like that, the first piece of the trap was set. Friday came faster than I expected, and with it, an opportunity one couldn't ignore. Heather had left early for her gym session, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and that same fake smile plastered across her face. I watched her back out of the driveway, my fingers drumming against the countertop. I wasn't sitting idle anymore. Within 10 minutes, I was dressed and in my car, tailing her like I was the star of my own detective thriller. It wasn't hard to follow her. Heather wasn't exactly subtle. She drove straight to the boutique hotel I'd found in her texts, the same one from the receipt in her gym bag. Room 217. I parked across the street, watching as she climbed out of the car, her gym gear looking suspiciously more like date night casual. She checked her reflection in the window of the car, ran a hand through her hair, and then disappeared through the hotel entrance. For a moment, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could go in there right now, catch her red-handed, and let the fallout happen. But no, that would be too easy. Instead, I got out of the car and walked to the front desk. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist, flashing my most convincing smile. "I left my phone in my wife's room earlier. Would it be possible to grab it real quick?" Room 217. The receptionist barely looked up. "Sure thing. I'll just need some ID." I slid my driver's license across the counter, and she barely glanced at it before handing me a spare keycard. That was almost disappointing. With the card in hand, I made my way to the second floor, my heart pounding louder with each step. The hallway smelled of cheap floral air freshener, and the carpet was the kind of patterned beige you'd see in 1,000 other hotels. I paused outside the door to 217. Voices murmured inside, muffled but unmistakable. Heather's laugh cut through the air, a sound I hadn't heard in weeks. It wasn't forced or polite. It was the laugh of a woman who thought she was untouchable. Sliding the key card into the lock, I waited for the click before pushing the door open. The scene inside was almost comical. Heather and Scott, yes, him, were sitting on the edge of the bed, wine glasses in hand, mid-laugh. The look on their faces when they saw me could have been framed and hung in a gallery of life's most awkward moments. "Don't let me interrupt," I said, stepping into the room. Heather shot up from the bed, her wine sloshing over the rim of her glass. "Nick, what the hell are you doing here?" Scott, to his credit, just stared, frozen like a deer in headlights. I closed the door behind me, taking my time. "Oh, just checking on my wife. Seems like you've been pretty busy lately." Heather's face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, anger, guilt, and finally, that cold, calculated mask I'd come to recognize. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, her voice too calm, too rehearsed. I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it looks exactly like what I thought it would be. Him, this room." I gestured around dramatically. "Pretty classic, honestly." Scott finally found his voice, standing awkwardly. "Look, man, I didn't know she was married." "Save it." I cut him off, my eyes never leaving Heather. "You don't matter here." "She does." Heather crossed her arms, her tone turning icy. "So what now, Nick? You barge in here, make a scene, and then what? Do you feel better?" It wasn't just her words. It was the venom behind them. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the Heather I thought I knew. This was someone who'd been lying so long. She didn't even care about getting caught. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, I'm not here to make a scene, Heather. I'm here to let you know that whatever this is, it's done. You can keep your lies, your wine, your Scott. I don't care." Her eyes narrowed, but I didn't give her the chance to respond. I turned to Scott, who was still awkwardly hovering near the bed. "And you, congratulations. You're her problem now." With that, I walked out of the room, leaving the door wide open behind me. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. When I left the hotel, I didn't feel rage or heartbreak. Not the way I expected. What I felt was clarity. A cold, calculated resolve that settled into my chest like armor. Heather thought she had the upper hand, but she didn't realize the game had shifted. She'd made her move, and now it was my turn. I went straight home, knowing exactly what I had to do. The first thing I did was grab every document that mattered: bank statements, the deed to the house, insurance policies. I packed my essentials: clothes, my passport, the laptop I'd been using to track Heather's little escapades, and threw it all into a suitcase. Next, I opened our joint bank account on my laptop. Heather wasn't exactly a financial genius. She probably hadn't noticed that I'd been transferring small amounts into a separate account for months. It had started as an emergency fund, just in case. Now it was my ticket out. With a few clicks, I drained the rest of the joint account, leaving just enough to cover her next credit card payment. She could figure out the rest on her own. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter, right next to a note that simply read, "You'll never hear from me again. Don't bother looking." I walked through the house one last time, taking in the life we'd built together. The framed photos on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out together, the little knickknacks that only made sense to us. Should have hurt. It should have felt like I was tearing my life apart. But all I felt was freedom. By the time Heather came home that evening, the house was silent. Empty. I didn't see her reaction, but I could imagine it. The shock, the confusion, the rage. Maybe she'd call Monica or Scott or even me. But she wouldn't find me, because I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving the entire city. 2 hours later, I was driving down the highway, the lights of our town shrinking in my rearview mirror. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, the screen lighting up with Heather's name. I let it ring. The voicemail notification popped up a minute later, but I didn't listen to it. I wasn't interested in her excuses or fake apologies. This wasn't a breakup. This was an erasure. Heather had cheated on me, Not just with Scott, but with every lie, every excuse, every ounce of trust she'd ripped away piece by piece. She'd destroyed the life we built, so I was building a new one. One where she didn't exist. That night, I checked into a small motel a few towns over. The room smelled faintly of bleach, and the bedspread was an ugly shade of green. But it didn't matter. It was mine. I pulled out my laptop, opening a folder labeled Closure. Inside was everything, every text, photo, and receipt I'd gathered over the past week. I stared at it for a moment before uploading it all to a shared drive. Then I drafted an email. The recipients, Heather's parents, her boss, Monica, and a few mutual friends. The subject line? The truth about Heather. I kept the email short and to the point. No anger, no theatrics. Just the facts. I attached the folder and hit send. There. Heather wanted to lie? She wanted to play games? Fine. But now everyone would know who she really was. I leaned back in the uncomfortable motel chair, my heart racing. This wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was justice. And as I stared out the window at the unfamiliar streets, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on out of morbid curiosity, was buzzing relentlessly. Texts, voicemails, emails, social media mentions. Heather's name was everywhere, like a wildfire spreading through dry brush. I scrolled through the messages one by one, letting the chaos unfold in front of me. From Monica, "What the hell, Nick? Is this real? Call me." From Heather's mother, "I don't know what to say. Please, can we talk? Heather is distraught." From Heather, "Nick, please, let's talk about this. I made a mistake, but we can fix it. I love you. Call me." Her words felt hollow. The same woman who had laughed with another man just days ago was now claiming to love me? No, I wasn't falling for it. Then there was Scott. He hadn't texted me, of course, but I'd noticed a post on his Instagram feed that morning. His profile was now private, but the last post before he locked it down was a cryptic message. People should mind their own business. The comments were brutal. People were tagging Heather, calling them both out. Whatever fantasy they'd been living in had just been incinerated. Good. By mid-afternoon, I decided to log into our shared social media account. One of those cheesy couple profiles Heather had insisted we create years ago. I'd mostly ignored it since she managed the posts, but today it served a purpose. I updated the bio to a single sentence. Heather is single. You'll have to ask her why. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Within minutes, the messages started rolling in. Friends who had no idea what was going on. Acquaintances demanding the juicy details. Even a few strangers chiming in with unsolicited advice. But I wasn't doing this for attention. I was doing it because Heather's betrayal deserved to be dragged into the light. That evening, I got a call from Monica. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Nick," she said, her voice a mix of concern and irritation. "What are you doing? This is crazy." "Crazy?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "You think I'm crazy? Have you read those texts? Seen the photos? Your best friend was screwing another guy for months." "I know," she shot back. "But this isn't the way to handle it. You're making everything worse." "For who?" I asked, my voice colder now. "Heather? Scott? Sorry if I'm not worried about their feelings, Monica. They didn't worry about mine." There was a pause on her end, the sound of her breath catching. "She's been crying all day, Nick. She says she didn't mean for it to happen like this." "Spare me the sob story," I said. "She had every opportunity to stop, Monica. Every chance to come clean. But she didn't. And now, she gets to live with the consequences." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I got a notification that Heather had deleted all her social media accounts. Her face, her posts, her carefully curated image. It was all gone. The only thing left was the wreckage she couldn't outrun. But I wasn't done yet. As I sat in the motel room, staring at my laptop, I realized there was one more thing I could do. Something that would seal this chapter of my life for good. I drafted another email, this time to Heather directly. Heather, you made your choices. You built your lies. Now you get to live with them. There's nothing left for us to discuss. Consider this my final message. I won't be coming back. Goodbye, Nick. Asterisk I hit send and closed the laptop, letting the silence of the room wash over me. Heather might still be trying to pick up the pieces, but I wasn't looking back. I'd burned the bridge, and it felt good. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was living in a movie where I just walked away from the explosion without flinching. I moved farther out of town, renting a small, no-frills apartment under an alias. I'd started piecing my life back together, new job prospects, new routine, even a new phone number. But just when I thought the storm had passed, the past came barreling back in the form of a knock at my door. It was a Tuesday evening, and I'd been halfway through a frozen pizza when the pounding on my door rattled me out of my quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't told anyone where I was, not even close friends. Cautiously, I approached the peephole. My blood ran cold. Heather. She looked disheveled. Her hair pulled into a messy ponytail and her face pale. She was clutching her phone in one hand and her car keys in the other, her eyes darting nervously up and down the hallway. For a moment I considered ignoring her. Let her think I wasn't home. But something about the desperation in her expression made me pause. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain lock in place. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She flinched, then looked up at me with wide, frantic eyes. "Nick, please. I need to talk to you. It's important." I narrowed my eyes. "We're done talking, Heather. You got my email." "Nick, it's not about that," she said, her voice cracking. "It's Scott. Something's wrong." The mention of his name sent a jolt of irritation through me. "Not my problem. You two made your bed." "Nick, he's gone," she interrupted, her tone desperate. "He disappeared. No one's seen him for days. His shop is closed, his phone's off, everything. I don't know what to do." For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Scott was gone. "Maybe he's just hiding from the fallout," I said dismissively. "You think people didn't find out what he did? Maybe he's laying low." "No, Nick," she said, shaking her head furiously. "This isn't that. Something's wrong. I think someone's after us." I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Us? There's no us, Heather. You burned that bridge, remember?" She leaned closer, gripping the edge of the door. "I know I screwed up, okay? But this isn't about us. Someone's been following me. My car's been keyed. I'm getting weird texts from unknown numbers, and now Scott's missing. Please, Nick, you're the only person I can trust." I stared at her, the irony of her words hitting me like a slap. The only person she could trust? After everything she'd done? But as much as I wanted to slam the door in her face, something about her fear felt real. I sighed, unhooking the chain and opening the door wider. "5 minutes," I said. "That's all you get." Heather stepped inside, glancing nervously around the small apartment. She didn't sit, just stood by the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Start talking," I said, leaning against the counter. She took a shaky breath. "It started a few days after everything came out. I thought it was just people gossiping, but then things got weird. Someone left a note on my car. It said, 'Liars always pay.'" I raised an eyebrow. "So? Sounds like karma to me." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "Nick, this isn't a joke. Yesterday someone followed me home, and now Scott's gone. His sister hasn't heard from him. His shop's locked up, and his car's still in the driveway. It's like he just vanished." The weight of her words settled in the air, heavy and unsettling. As much as I wanted to dismiss her, a part of me couldn't shake the unease creeping into my chest. "Why come to me?" I asked finally. "Why not go to the police?" She hesitated, chewing her lip. "Because I don't know who's doing this. And I thought maybe it was you." I laughed again, this time louder. "You think I'm stalking you? That I did something to Scott?" "I don't know," she snapped, her voice rising. "I don't know what to think anymore. All I know is that you were angry, and now all of this is happening." I shook my head, stepping closer to her. "Heather, listen to me carefully. I'm not the one doing this. If someone's after you, it's not me. But maybe, just maybe, you should start asking yourself who else you pissed off." She stared at me, her lips trembling, but she didn't respond. "Now get out," I said, my voice low and firm. "I gave you your 5 minutes. This isn't my mess to clean up." For a moment, she looked like she might argue. But then she nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and walked out the door. I locked it behind her, my mind racing. Scott was missing. Heather was being followed. Someone was targeting them. And for the first time since I'd walked out of her life, I wondered if this wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of something darker. Heather's visit left a sour taste in my mouth. Like a bad dream you can't shake off even after you wake up. The logical part of me wanted to write her off completely, let her deal with the mess she'd created. But something about her words nagged at me. Scott's disappearance, the ominous notes, someone following her, felt calculated. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was running in circles, piecing together fragments of everything I knew. Heather's lies, Scott's arrogance, the fallout from my email bombshell. It all painted a chaotic picture. But this felt bigger. By midnight, I was back at my laptop, diving into Scott's online presence again. His business website was still up, though outdated. The Instagram account was locked down, but his Yelp page had recent activity. A scathing review caught my eye. "Beware of this place. Owner is a liar and a crook. You can't trust people like him. He'll take what's yours and leave you ruined." It was signed by Truthseeker77. A quick search showed the same username popping up in forums and comment sections, all targeting Scott. Someone had it out for him, and it started weeks before Heather's affair was exposed. I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning. Scott had enemies, and judging by the tone of this person's posts, whoever they were had a personal vendetta. But that didn't explain why Heather was being dragged into it. The next morning, I decided to test a theory. I drove to Scott's shop, pulling into the empty parking lot. The place looked abandoned. No lights, no cars, no sign of life. A closed for repairs sign hung crookedly on the front door. But the weirdest part? The padlock on the gate was new, the metal shiny and unscuffed. Someone had locked this place down recently. I parked across the street and waited, watching. Hours passed, but no one came or went. Just as I was about to leave, a black SUV pulled into the lot, idling near the side entrance. 2 men in dark jackets got out, their movements brisk and deliberate. They weren't customers, that much was clear. One of them produced a key, unlocking the gate with ease. I snapped a photo with my phone, zooming in on their faces. They didn't look like cops, more like private security. What the hell was Scott involved in? That night, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello." A low voice crackled on the other end. "Nick, you need to listen carefully." I froze. "Who is this?" "That's not important. What's important is that you stay out of this. Whatever you think you're doing, drop it. Walk away." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "You've been asking questions about Scott. That's a mistake. He got involved with people he shouldn't have, and now he's paying for it. Don't make the same mistake." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, a sick feeling pooling in my stomach. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. Scott had gotten himself tangled in something dangerous, and now Heather was caught in the crossfire. And somehow I was too. The next morning, I woke to another surprise. An envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "Keep digging and you'll end up just like him." Taped to the note was a photo of Scott's car, abandoned in a parking garage, the driver's side window shattered. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't revenge. This was a warning, and I wasn't sure I could ignore it. The photo in the envelope stared back at me, the image of Scott's car with its shattered window etched into my brain. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the note and shoved it back into the envelope. Whoever had sent it wasn't just toying with Scott or Heather anymore. They were coming for me. For a moment, I considered packing up and running again, disappearing for real this time, leaving Heather and her mess in the rearview mirror. But the thought didn't sit right with me. I'd already sacrificed my life, my peace, and my dignity because of her betrayal. If I ran now, they'd win, whoever they were. No, I wasn't running. Not this time. I started my counterattack by digging deeper. If Scott's disappearance was tied to something shady, there had to be a trail. Bank records, property deals, lawsuits, anything that could explain why someone was going to such lengths. It didn't take long to find a lead. Scott had been sued 6 months ago by a former business partner, a guy named Richard Klein. The court filings painted an ugly picture. Embezzlement, forged contracts, and money laundering. Scott had apparently skated by without criminal charges. But the civil suit had left him with a mountain of debt. Richard Klein's name popped up in another search, too. His obituary. He died under mysterious circumstances just 2 weeks after filing the lawsuit. An accidental fall from a hotel balcony. Couldn't be a coincidence. The next step was finding Heather. As much as I hated the idea, she was a key piece in this puzzle. She might know something she didn't even realize was important. I called her from a burner phone I'd picked up at a gas station earlier. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Nick?" she said, her voice laced with surprise and relief. "Where are you?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. I'm at Monica's." "Why?" "Stay there," I said. "I'm coming over." She started to protest, but I hung up before she could argue. When I arrived, Heather was pacing nervously in Monica's living room. She froze when she saw me, her face a mix of fear and hope. "Nick, what's going on?" she asked. I held up the envelope. "This was waiting for me this morning. Someone's threatening me now, Heather. They sent me a photo of Scott's car." "What aren't you telling me?" Her eyes widened, and she sank onto the couch. "I don't know anything, I swear. I told you everything I know." "Think harder," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. Scott was into something shady. He pissed off the wrong people, and now he's gone. Did he ever mention the name Richard Klein? Her face went pale. Scott said he had a falling out with an old partner, but he never gave me details. I didn't ask. It wasn't my business. "It is now," I said, my voice sharp. "Whoever's doing this isn't just after Scott. They're cleaning house, and you're part of the mess they're trying to scrub away." Heather buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," I said bitterly. "You just thought you were having fun. But now it's real, Heather. People are disappearing. People are dying." Her head shot up, tears streaming down her face. "What do we do?" "We." I laughed darkly. "There's no we, Heather. You're on your own. But I'll give you one piece of advice. Go to the cops. Tell them everything. Maybe they can help you. Or maybe you'll just drag them down with you." I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "Nick, please. I know I don't deserve it. But don't let them hurt me." I looked back at her, the woman I once loved now reduced to a broken shell of herself. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anger or betrayal. I just felt tired. "Good luck, Heather," I said quietly, and walked out the door. 2 weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Scott's body was found. Heather's in protective custody. Thought you'd want to know. Stay safe." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I deleted the message and tossed the burner phone into the trash. It was over. Heather had played her game, Scott had played his, and whoever was pulling the strings had cleaned up the board. I was the last man standing. But as I stared out at the horizon, I realized something important. I'd won. Not because I was smarter or faster or better, but because I'd walked away. And now, finally, I could start over. For real this time,